Hey there and welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about spaces with open concepts. This is part of a series that's going to bridge the gap between how we talk about and evaluate buildings as architecture versus how we talk about and evaluate them as real estate. I think this is a really rich topic and I'm really excited to dive in. And we're going to kick things off with a close look at how Frank Lloyd Wright developed his brand of open concepts, which he termed organic. So stay tuned. My name is Stuart Hicks, and I teach architecture and design studios and lecture courses at UIC in Chicago. Way back in 2008, I was an eager young design architectural professor, and I moved to Urbana, Illinois to teach at the University of Illinois, and I wanted to buy a house that would make being in Urbana as exciting and as tolerable as possible. We settled on an incredible little house that was designed and built by a former professor for himself during the late 1970s. I and all my architect friends adored this house, but the process of buying it and selling it was arduous, to say the least, and it revealed just how different the real estate world is and how it looks at buildings differently than architecture. For instance, we had a hard time getting a mortgage because it didn't have any comps, and naive me went into thinking that this house's uniqueness was a virtue. Silly me. Then when it came time to move to Chicago years later, the house's uniqueness again became a liability because we had trouble finding the right buyer, and in this case it was a bonsai tree enthusiast, and the drama never seemingly ended. When crafting the house's description to attract the elusive bonsai enthusiast, the real estate agent wrote that it was an open concept, which is a phrase that I had never heard before previous to that. Since the house had a total of 3 interior walls, it was pretty easy to make out what she was talking about though. But since then, I've probably heard the term open concept hundreds of times on places like HGTV and whatever else, and each time it's used as if describing a style of interior spaces that are all designed with a common theme in mind. Apartment therapy defines open concept as a type of floor plan where walls and doors are taken out and living spaces merge into one. This typically refers to the walls between the kitchen, living room, and dining rooms, but not the bedrooms. Maybe it's like how the Inuit language has numerous delicately nuanced words for snow, but to architects, not all open concepts are created equal. While the term may be useful in a real estate context, the term seems overly general in a way that makes it unuseful for architects. So I'd like to use the occasion of this brand new video series to break down how real estate agents and architects think about buildings differently. And we'll kick it off by discussing particular kinds of open concepts, and in this case Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture. And then later on in other videos we'll compare and contrast his with other architects' versions of open concepts. Hello, my name is Jeff Lewis, and I like to flip houses in Los Angeles and make lots of money. One key to my strategy is to turn houses into open concepts. This is what the people want. Hello, I'm Frank Lloyd Wright, and my mouth isn't quite aligned with my head, and I like to make organic plans. Organic plans allow for freedom of choice instead of the confinement of corners and rooms, which serve as like bases to confine us. I don't think I really have a southern accent. Feel like this hat makes me want to talk with one in this newfound mustache. You do have a good mustache, I have to admit. Thank you, sir. Frank Lloyd Wright was influenced by shingle style houses, which were really popular in 19th century America. These houses were categorized under the shingle style umbrella, not just for the use of shingles on the outside, but also for their shared cross shape, a typical arrangement of public rooms on the first floor, the stairs that are located at the center, and then this wraparound veranda porch. Since architectural styles aren't static and are continuously subject to evolution, the shingle style had been experiencing a kind of pressure to accommodate an increase in openness between the public rooms on the main level. Before Frank Lloyd Wright, architects had been achieving this by increasing the size of the doorways between the main rooms, which is an obvious way to do it. When young Frank Lloyd Wright approached the problem, though, he discovered a slightly different way to achieve the desired openness between the rooms. Rather than further dissolving the wall by increasing the size of the door, he targeted the room itself and arranged them so that they overlapped on the corners, and then he subtracted the walls where they overlapped. The impact that this has on the way space is experienced and understood in these rooms is profound. The perception of each room is now subject to different points of view. In this configuration, one can stand in one single space without moving and claim that they're simultaneously both in the living room and in the dining room at the same time. And in this scenario, room definitions have become completely relative and completely dependent on your perception of them. And when this happens, the floor appears continuous, with no clearly demarcated thresholds between the rooms. This floor is an unbroken slab that flows from room to room and can be subdivided up however the architect decides, which is a fundamentally different way of thinking about the building than as a collection of rooms. Because the rooms overlap at the corner, people will be primarily moving from room to room diagonally between them, fundamentally changing the nature of space. Even though the overall composition of the building is centralized around this fireplace or the objects in the middle, the movement and the experience of the space is dynamically changing between the rooms. As Frank Lloyd Wright's work evolved away from the direct reinterpretation of the Shingle-style home, the remnants still remain, and the discoveries of the continuous floor and the diagonal movement take on a life of their own with secondary consequences and discoveries. The Ward Willits house looks like a stretched out version of the ones that we were looking at before. The central arrangement remains, but the rest of the house distorts in a way that the outer shape contorts based on the internal needs. The resultant outer shape is clearly less important than the continuity and the coherence of the interior spaces. At the heart of everything is a large pinwheel-shaped object that responds to the needs of the rooms that are on each side of it. For Frank Lloyd Wright, rooms are not modules to be moved around. Instead, the house has to be considered as one cohesive entity because each space flows from one to the next. And Frank Lloyd Wright described this kind of architecture like an organism, with rooms and objects considered like organs inside of a body, with each interdependent on the other. This inside-out, diagonally composed, continuous, and interdependent room strategy is the nature of Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture. The Robie House, located here in Chicago, introduces a different kind of layout, but the same principles of interconnectivity apply. Rooms stretch from one to the other with fixed objects as screens that create privacy between spaces. These objects don't fully touch surfaces like the floor or the wall or the ceiling, so they appear to be less visually disruptive. There are objects that are fixed, but that look like wooden furniture that could be moved around with feet, or with wooden slats that provides privacy between the spaces. In the Robie house, the fireplace works similarly. It's positioned between spaces like the living room and the dining room, and it's designed in a way so as to allow people to see the continuity of surfaces that define the space, like the floor or the ceilings or the walls, which run right past the fireplace, but that it blocks direct vision from one space to the other. Since it's freestanding, it offers no registration of a single line of difference between the spaces on either side of it. All these tricks are in service of expressing the organic, diagonal continuity between rooms, maintaining privacy and visual separation of activities, but enhancing the perception that things are all connected physically. Another result of this kind of thinking, which comes in later works of Frank Lloyd Wright, is the corner window. A corner window is when two planes of glass join at the corner without a mullion to hold up the glass in place. The corner is a logical place for structural support, so when you don't have one there, the floor and the ceilings feel like they're cantilevered out, and they showcase how you don't really need support by revealing the absence at the corner. If you've never seen one of these corner windows in person before, it provides a really unique experience. This kind of window projects the inhabitant from the interior out into the exterior, as it seems like you're standing on the outside of the building almost, at the edges of the floor slab. The corner window increases your sense of continuity between the spaces of the interior into the spaces of the outside. Uniquely, your view outward is dependent on your position relative to the window, so you can actually have a 180-degree view, but only if you turn your head or shift your body in relationship to the position of the window.
The corner window was indicative of an idea conceived early in my work that the box was a fascist symbol and that the architecture of freedom, of democracy, needed something beside the box.
In sum, open concepts come in a variety of flavors. Frank Lloyd Wright was interested in proliferating his organic plan strategy, which he ultimately tied to ideas about freedom of movement, lack of confinement, and even political notions of democracy and choice. It was about diagonal overlap and the connection between rooms which subdivided within a continuous floor slab. His organic architecture was designed from the inside out, meaning that the exterior shape of the building is basically the result of interior decisions. Those interior decisions are in service of the intricately interdependent spaces on the inside. Thanks for watching. I love making these videos, and if you love watching them, please consider liking the video and giving us a subscribe. Thank you.